right, the second part of chapter 4 deals with mainly deals with looking at the digestive system. And even though this is not an anatomy class, looking at the digestive system is really an important part of learning about our overall health and overall nutrition. We're getting ready to start kind of a look into the different macronutrients and then eventually micronutrients. And so we're going to see how they're affect our overall health, including our digestion and digestive system. So let's just kind of take a tour through some of the main aspects here of the digestive system. Of course, digestion is breaking down food. It includes things like a mechanical, physical breaking down food, but also really the chemical processing, chemical breaking down food or nutrients. And so like in the next chapter, we'll look at carbohydrates. When you take like a complex carbohydrate and you chemically break it down, you're breaking it smaller and smaller down into smaller and smaller sugar units. Or a protein, you break that down into smaller and smaller portions called amino acids. And so that's all a part of the digestive process. And then the absorption down at the bottom is once you've gone through the digestion part of this, you've got to get those nutrients in those small units like the amino acids or the simple sugars or the small fats or fatty acids. You have to get those absorbed into the bloodstream. And that's going to be taking place in the intestine. So we're going to be looking at digestion and absorption kind of throughout. One of the things, though, to consider is something known as bioavailability. It's just how well some nutrient gets actually absorbed into the bloodstream. Not all nutrients have the same absorption rate, I guess, as you digest them and you get them into the intestines. To actually get them into the bloodstream, it kind of depends on what nutrient you're looking at. Even inside of nutrient categories like carbohydrates, not all carbohydrates get absorbed equally at the same rate. And so that's how available those nutrients are. You may be familiar with something called celiac, which is a gluten allergy. If you're allergic to the protein gluten, which is found mainly in things like wheat flour, that gluten limits the bioavailability of the nutrients that we eat, because that gluten, or the reaction to the gluten protein creates a problem in the intestines where you can't absorb those nutrients easily. So let's take a look through here and kind of see what we can find out about the digestive system. Like I said, we'll talk about mechanical and chemical. Digestion technically begins in the mouth. You may not realize that, but just the process of chewing up food. Now that's mechanical. Sometimes it's referred to as physical, but that's just breaking the food into smaller and smaller pieces. You're not chemically changing it in any way. You're not breaking any chemical bonds. You're just making it smaller and smaller, but that helps the next phase, which is chemical digestion. Technically, you're doing a little bit of chemical digestion inside of the mouth. That doesn't amount to a lot, but you are mixing the foods that you eat with your saliva. That has moisture, that lubricates the food. It even has a little bit of an enzyme there, mainly salivary amylase. Salivary meaning it's coming from our salivary glands in the mouth. Amylase is breaking down starch. It's an enzyme. We know this is an enzyme because it ends in the letters ASE. And so it helps to digest starch. A little bit of lipase there. Lipase is an enzyme that helps to break down fats. And so you have a little bit of these enzymes to kind of kickstart that process of digestion, chemical digestion. Also in the mouth, associated with nutrition and the foods that we eat, are our taste buds. Taste buds, of course, on the tongue, they have the ability to detect different sensations. Really, they're detecting different chemicals, and those chemical reactions, or those sensory receptors that we have in our taste buds, are sending information to the brain, getting it to process that and let us know, our perception of that particular taste or that particular chemical flavoring. Most everybody's heard of these tastes, especially something that's sweet or sour or salty or bitter. But research has shown that we actually have a taste for a fat type taste, actually. It's usually maybe an acidic type of a taste, and maybe even could be a little bit on the sour as well. And then the umami there on the end, that's more of a savory type of a taste. The smell, we may not realize it, but smell plays an important part in our taste as well. And that's because our nasal passage has receptors in it that's actually sending up the sense of smell as we're eating food. And that's also sending up the sense of smell to our brain and helping us to perceive, how, give us that information, how we perceive those flavors and those tastes as well. And so all of these go into our nutrition because that goes into our appetite and what foods we like and what foods are, we don't like. One of the foods that, a lot of people like is yogurt, but then some people just don't have kind of a taste for, that acidy type taste for yogurt, or other types of foods or whatever. And so they are very related to our nutrition. Going back to kind of going through the digestive system proper there, after we're chewing up the food and we swallow, of course, that's going to send food down through our esophagus. This is literally a muscular lined tube that's connecting the throat or the pharynx down to the stomach. And so you chew up the food, you swallow that. One kind of a vocab word here is once you mix up that food, you start that digestion process, you chew it up, you mix it with some saliva, a little bit of enzyme, you swallow it. It's now referred to as a bolus. It travels down the esophagus, kind of a wave-like action. That, again, the esophagus is lined with smooth muscle, and it kind of contracts and kind of pushes that food down that tube. Now, one thing that you do have, and you may have seen this word before, is the epiglottis. This is basically a piece of connective tissue that is covering over your voice box or your larynx whenever you swallow, so that food doesn't go through your windpipe area or your voice box and then down through the trachea or your windpipe. So that is keeping the bolus from entering the trachea or the windpipe. That's going to prevent you from choking. That basically allows that little voice box area. You can kind of feel your Adam's apple in your front part of your neck there. That's the larynx region. And so that epiglottis closes over, and whenever you swallow, to make sure that that food goes through down the esophagus, down to the stomach. And so you've got some little diagrams here we can kind of look at. It's sometimes hard to kind of picture what you're looking at here. You're looking at the side view, cutaway view, just kind of orient you up. Here's a nasal cavity. Your nose would be here. You're taking in air here. This person's mouth is pretty much closed almost. The lips are here, taking in food. The person has taken in some food, getting ready to swallow it. They chewed it up, mixed it with some saliva, getting ready to swallow here. And now it's getting ready to go down. Now, right in this area is your larynx. And so you got that flap of tissue here called the epiglottis, and that's going to kind of fold over and cover over this opening here. That allows this food, and it's kind of small here, but allows that food or that bolus to go down behind the trachea, and it will continue going down through the esophagus. Once the swallowing process is over, if you notice that little flap of tissue kind of extends back upward or outward, and that's going to open back up this area to the larynx so that you can breathe in. Another good vocabulary word, you may have seen this before, is called peristalsis. You kind of see here it's smooth muscle contractions. It's almost like a wave-like motion. And so you have repetitive contractions in the smooth muscle that lines your esophagus and your stomach and intestines, for that matter. But that aligns your esophagus here, and that kind of helps squeeze the food down, or the food mass or that bolus down the esophagus. It's almost like, maybe not the best example. It's almost like squeezing toothpaste out of a tube or squeezing something down a tube. That food's going to make its way to the stomach. Again, this is a muscular storage sac, really, maybe not storage, but a muscular sac container, where it still has a little bit of mechanical digestion taking place, not as much, but those muscles are just like any other muscles, they're going to be contracting. And so when they contract, they actually churn or kind of squeeze the remaining food in the stomach, kind of squeezing out that all together. In the meantime, it's squeezing and mixing that food with HCl, that's hydrochloric acid. Other enzymes are there, especially the enzyme called pepsin. Pepsin helps to break down proteins. When you digest proteins, they're going to break down smaller and smaller into small chemical units called amino acids. But you have to have an enzyme to do that, and the pepsin enzyme seems to work very well at a low pH, an acidic pH. So that acid helps to start the breakdown process of the protein inside of your stomach, and the foods that we eat. It helps to denature those proteins, and then the enzymes help to kind of speed up the process to break down the proteins into amino acid. So what's keeping the stomach acid and the enzymes from actually digesting the stomach itself, because the stomach has muscle there too, it's got protein there too. You've got a relatively thick mucus layer or lining here inside of the stomach, and that's helping to lubricate and kind of create a protective barrier there inside of the stomach. Here's the stomach now. Once food passes through the stomach, the next location would be the small intestines. Now, you're going to have absorption taking place here, but you also have more digestion taking place in the small intestines as well. And that's because you've got enzymes. Let's see, I had we'll talk about the enzymes here in a minute, but you actually have enzymes coming from the pancreas going into the small intestines to help finish any kind of digestion that needs to take place. But you're also going to get absorption of those nutrients. Once digestion is completed, those nutrients get absorbed into the bloodstream via the small intestines. One of the things that kind of helps out this process are what are called villi. Villi are finger-like projections, very small. Instead of being a flat, smooth inner lining, the inner lining of the intestines is kind of kind of goes up and down. You've got folds that are inside of there, and they have these finger-like projections that stick out. That's where the capillaries are going to be. These small blood vessels are going to be, and they're going to help to absorb these nutrients. We've got to get those nutrients into the bloodstream through these capillaries. To further help this, what they did here was kind of neat. They've got the villi or villus, which is singular. They take one of these villus cells, they enlarged it, and they show us that there's actually microvilli, very small extensions coming out of the cell. That's really there to kind of help increase the amount of surface area. So the more surface area is exposed, the more efficient the nutrient absorption process is going to be. So the more surface area is there, the easier it is to get nutrients to absorb, to soak through these cells, and eventually make their way to the bloodstream. So all these nutrients, water-soluble nutrients are going through those capillaries, the villi. Fat-soluble is a little different. They form what's called a chylomicron. The word is here, and there's specialized capillaries called lacteals that absorb anything that's fat-soluble. So the fats that we eat and digest, they get kind of converted into a special form called a chylomicron that gets absorbed via these lacteals, small capillaries specifically for the absorption of fats. Now, this is kind of a big picture here, but let me kind of show you. We're looking at the abdominal cavity. If you can imagine, the diaphragm would be up here. We've got the liver here. Up under that, we've got the gallbladder. And then on this side, we have the stomach coming down, and then the start of the small intestines, the duodenum is here. And then we have the pancreas right in this curve. And that's because the pancreas is going to be producing some enzymes that will go through this duct here, this little passageway, and get secreted or excreted out into the that first section of the small intestines. So it's producing, the pancreas is producing some enzymes that go directly into the intestines. Also, the liver is going to be producing some bile. Bile is going to help you digest fats. It does a few other things, but one thing it does is help to digest fats. It gets stored here in the gallbladder, and then it has its own bile duct or passageway that's going to go down, connect into the small intestines here. Don't forget that the pancreas also produces hormones such as insulin, and we'll kind of briefly look at that in chapter 5. So I kind of mentioned all these things already, but the liver is going to process and store a lot of nutrients for us. One of the things, a couple of things that it does a lot of chemical type reactions, biochemical reactions for us. But one of the things that it does, it helps produce cholesterol in the body. We need some cholesterol being produced. Many times, though, we have, depending on our diet, many times we may have too much cholesterol that we eat in our diet. That can cause some problems, but our liver is in charge of kind of producing cholesterol. It also produces the bile. That bile gets stored in this muscular sac or compartment called the gallbladder, and then gets released into the intestines. That helps to break down fats. And I mentioned also the pancreas producing enzymes to help digest things like fats and proteins and carbohydrates. It also produces bicarbonate. You may have seen bicarbonate before. Sodium bicarbonate is literally baking soda. So it's actually producing a base. You think of an acid and base, so this is a base solution that's going to help to neutralize the pH inside of the intestine. So let me back up and show you here. There's a stomach up here. Remember, the stomach has a pH that's very low, very acidic, HCl, hydrochloric acid. And so when that passes into the intestines, you need something to kind of balance out or neutralize that acid. So one of the things that the pancreas is doing is basically making a base type solution, a bicarbonate type solution. It's going to go into the intestines, helps kind of balance out the pH. That's going to help the enzymes here work a little bit better. Once food has passed now from the small intestines, eventually it's going to make its way to the large intestines. And here you see kind of a diagram view of the large intestines. You may see this referred to as the colon. You see the different sections there, the ascending, transverse, descending colon, sigmoid colon, S-shaped type colon there, and then the rectum. A couple more things here. Microbes are very important in our bodies. The microbiology that we have, the living microscopic organisms that we have in our intestines is very important. They help us to basically finish breaking down some undigested food material, especially plant-based fiber. The gut flora that we have, or the microbiota that we have, helps to break down some of that. We even get a little bit of vitamins from some of the microbes that we naturally have in the large intestines. Some microbes produce a little bit of vitamin K. Our body needs this. The microbes don't necessarily use it. They secrete it, and we actually can absorb it and use it for vitamin K. Thiamine and biotin, these are B vitamins. You kind of do the same thing. The microbes kind of produce a little bit of it. We can kind of harvest it and actually use it. Sometimes those microbes kind of get out of balance in our system. Depends on, and that can happen for a variety of reasons. Your book kind of mentions how if your diet is very limited, in other words, you're in a starvation type mode, you're not getting, you're malnourished, you're not getting the proper nutrition, then that can lead to some problems with the natural bacteria that we have. Sometimes antibiotics can do this. And so if you have to take antibiotics, especially if you have to take long-term antibiotics or several, prescriptions of antibiotics or several rounds of antibiotics, antibiotics sometimes will have a specific target that they're trying to get rid of a particular microbe, but sometimes they're more general and they actually get rid of some of the kind of quote unquote good bacteria as well. Even stress sometimes affects our levels of the healthy kind of good bacteria in our body. Any kind of imbalance that we have associated with those natural good bacteria that we have is called intestinal dysbiosis. There's just kind of an imbalance there. Okay. So what can we do to kind of restore that balance? Because we need these. These things help us to digest some of the foods that we can't normally digest. They just help our body in several different ways. And so it's always good to kind of keep this in check. One thing you can do, you may see these words and not know the difference, probiotic and prebiotic. Probiotic, you can, certain foods have probiotics. These are actually living microbes that have been cultured and grown in a laboratory condition that we can ingest, and they start kind of colonizing inside of our intestines. And so there are natural foods that we can eat that have been fermented, such as yogurt. That's a great place to get some probiotic living microbes. And if you go to the grocery store and you kind of look on the side, if it's a yogurt that has probiotics there, it'll say something like contains live cultures. So those, it's usually a bacteria called lactobacillus. It gives the flavoring for the yogurt, but it also provides us with, those living cultures. And so they're very helpful to have. And so that kind of helps keep our intestinal tract kind of in order. It may help prevent things like diarrhea and other GI tract problems. But that's a probiotic. Sometimes you can purchase or you can purchase supplements that you can take in pill form, and you can kind of look on the label and it says, this particular supplement contains, 5 billion, usually it's like CFU or some type of colony forming unit or some type of a measurement there of how many cultured microbes that tablet or that pill contains. So that's a probiotic. A prebiotic is basically something that the microbes need to kind of feed on, because again, they're living organisms inside of us. Well, they have to have something to kind of feed on. And usually this is something that has lots of fiber in it or plant vegetables and fiber materials. And so that actually helps promote the growth of these healthy microbes inside of our body. So the probiotics are the actual microbes. Prebiotics you can kind of think of as bacteria food, right? It's just some natural fiber that we can ingest, kind of help our bodies kind of take care of our bacteria that we have. So I hope that kind of helps you kind of give an overview of the digestive system, and we'll kind of put that into place as how it affects our overall health and nutrition also. We've got one more section to chapter 4. Like I said, chapter 4 is a fairly long chapter, so I divided this out into 3 videos. So I have one more lecture video for chapter 4 that you can watch. Thanks, guys.